There goes Australia's image as a country of law and equality. For the first time in our history, it will be a criminal offence for some Australians to come home from overseas. The word Nazi government is used by some. Legal or not, there is a real risk the Australian Health Minister Greg Hunt's action will result in Australians dying in India. With Australia's quarantine and health systems, lives would be saved if those Australian citizens were flown home from India. A grave error by Greg Hunt. Australia is telling its citizens in distress that they are on their own. Australians trying to return home from India could face up to 5 years in jail and/or a $66,600 Australian dollars fine. The temporary ban is the first in Australia's history that makes it illegal for its citizens to return home. The law takes effect from Monday and will be reviewed on May 15. Australia will suspend direct passenger flights from India until May 15, to avoid the spread of more virulent COVID-19 variants. PM Scott Morrison also says Australia will send medical supplies to India, which has been struggling with a shortage of beds and oxygen supplies. The Australian government is obligated to bring citizens home, not lock them out. This has to be the most Nazi government this country has ever seen, says Frank Bird, an angry Australian. Within the next 48 hours, returning citizens will be threatened with 5 years jail if they've been in India in the past 2 weeks. Frankly, I am not shocked by the reaction to criminalise the act of returning citizens from India to Australia. Some of us have always known we are conditional citizens, tweeted Nyadol Nayuan, an Australian stranded in India. Alan Sunderland said, Australia should be chartering dozens of planes as we speak to bring as many Australian citizens home from India as we can. The return legs of those flights should be full of oxygen tanks and other urgent medical supplies. To do any less than that is unconscionable. Neha Mdauk said, it absolutely is racist that people flying to Australia from India could face up to 5 years jail. When the US, Italy, the UK, and Spain were seeing horrifying numbers, at no point was a punitive response considered. One rule for people of color, another for white people. A scientifically backed decision? Quarantine for everybody coming from that part of Asia and more, also for the many that after India are going to Thailand, Malaysia and then return to Australia, added Nicola. Australian cricket stars Kane Richardson and Adam Zampa have returned from India despite a federal government ban on travel from the coronavirus-ravaged country. Peter Cronu added, Australia, to its shame, has not supported the waiving of intellectual property rights on COVID-19 vaccines, so damning thousands to death. An Australian expat in India feels, the Australian government is basically saying the few citizens in India is worth less than the millions in Australia. Twitter.com. Amit Kumar in Australia compares India with Australia. Same here in Australia mate. 3x bigger land mass than India and population is just 2.5 crore, 55x lesser and 150x lesser population density with much cleaner air, much higher per capita income etc. etc. Still no vaccination here. The two can't be compared.